Hello, everyone. Welcome back to our virtual Dirshu. Mr. Berurah here. We're continuing to learn Hilchos Yom Tov. Hopefully, today we will be learning Daf Kuf Lamed Gimel Amid Beis, as well as Daf Kuf Lamed Dalet Amid Aleph, so that we'll pick up another page on the Dirshu schedule. So we begin on Kuf Lamed Gimel Amid Beis on the top line, Siman Tov Kuf Yud Dalet, continuing to learn Sif Gimel. We've been discussing the laws of Kivui on Yom Tov, the malacha of extinguishing a fire on Yom Tov. Continues the Ramah near the end of the first line on Kuf Lamed Gimel Amid Beis. It is permissible to put a burning lamp in a place where the wind will blow it out. Literally, let's translate the words literally. I'll just mention as a side point, this is something that I always have to struggle to teach to Bacharim when they're learning Gemara. And that is, sometimes the Bacharim, they have a tendency to read a phrase from the Gemara, and they have in their mind that they know what it means. So they read the phrase, and then they say the pshat that they decided the Gemara means, or what they expect the Gemara to mean. But they don't pay any attention to the actual translation of the words. And that is a huge mistake when you're learning. Because if you free yourself from allegiance to the actual words on the page, or to the actual words of Rashi, or to the actual words of Taisus, or in this case, to the actual words of the Ramah, you become free to learn whatever pshat you want, no matter how wrong it might be. And it could lead to disastrous mistakes. So I always teach them, you must have allegiance to the words on the page. You have to translate them accurately. So to translate what the Ramah says, it's permissible laha midner, to stand up a lamp, to place a burning lamp, the makom shaharuach sholet, in a place where the wind does come, kedei sheyichbe, so that it should be blown out and it should be extinguished. Now let's see exactly what that means. Says the Mishnah, nice cut and chaf hey, and this is why I was so careful with the translation of the words. B'makom shaharuach sholet, you're putting it in a place where the wind does blow. Ritzayna loymar, what the Ramah wants to say is, sheyachal lishleit kisheyavai. You're not putting it in a place where the wind is actively blowing. You're putting it in a place where, if the wind does blow, it will reach that place. The word sholet means rules. You're putting it in a makom shaharuach sholet, in a place where the wind rules. What does that mean? It means it's a place that's exposed to the wind, so that if the wind does come, the wind will blow there. But you're not taking the lamp and putting it in the active wind. If you do that, you're doing kivui mamish, like the Mishnah Berurah is going to say soon. What you're doing is you're putting it in a place that's exposed to the wind, so that should the wind come, the wind will blow the nair out. So says the Mishnah Berurah here, nice cut and chaf hey, you're putting the nair in a place where the wind can be shaylet should the wind start to blow. The tama heter, and the rationale for this heter, why is it mutter to put the nair there? Mishum, it's because the einay ela gram kibui ba'alma, because this is considered gram kibui. What you're doing is, you're taking a burning nair, you're putting it down somewhere where it's exposed to the wind, but the wind is not blowing. Okay, maybe an hour from now the wind will come. If the wind will come, it will cause the nair to go out. But that's gram kibui. That's not direct kibui. And the gram kibui is mutter. However, the Mishnah Berurah continues and he says, there are achrayim that are more machmer on this ruling, and they say you're not allowed to put it there at all. The b'chol rega v'rega haruach manashev. What do you mean it's a place that the wind can come if it blows? Winds are constantly blowing. Now it's a little bit of a breeze. Later it might become more of a wind, but the air outside is never completely still. And therefore, when you're putting it in a place that's exposed to the wind, that means that you're putting it in the wind. So they're more machmer, and they say you can't do this. When we times that, and because of this chumrah, haminig belel Yom Tov, the minig on the night of Yom Tov is she'ein loikchen haneros mibeis hakneses lebeisam. They used to have the custom kederech she'osin b'motzoi Shabbos. What they used to do was everybody needed candles, everybody needed lamps in their house at night. That was their lighting. So what did they do? When they left shul on Motzei Shabbos, they didn't want to leave burning neros in the shul overnight when nobody is there. So everybody took a ner and they brought it home with them. And that's how they had a ner at home. On Yom Tov night, they did not take the neros with them, because to take the ner with them outside, they're taking it out in the wind and it may very well blow out. And they were machmir not to take the ner outside where it's exposed to the wind. Now, what did they do so that the ner shouldn't be sitting in the shul overnight? Rather, they did what we learned earlier you're allowed to do. They stuck the candle into loose sand so that when it would burn down to the level of the sand would collapse and put it out. The chanal, like we learned earlier, b'sif kat and chaf aleph. Okay. So the Ramah said here, however, on the second line, you're not allowed to place the ner there in kvar haruach menashev. If the wind is already blowing, then you're not allowed to do this, even according to the kula of the Ramah. We saw the Muhammadik opinion, that you're not allowed to do this even if the wind is not blowing. But if the wind is blowing already, you're not allowed to put a ner there. Says the Mishnah, Chavav, Haruach Menashev, if the wind is already blowing, Afilu Hurak Ruach Mitsuya, even if it's just an ordinary breeze and not one that you would expect is going to blow the ner out, you're not allowed to put the ner there. The Oz Chashiv Kimechabe Mamish. If the wind is already blowing, then you're not allowed to put it there, because that's already like a direct act of kibui. Yeah. Okay. Ois cotton dalad. Sif dalad in the mechaber. Ner shekava. Let's say you had a burning lamp or a burning candle, and it went out. Veroitza lahadlikai bay bayayim. So you had a candle burning on Yom Tov, and for whatever reason, it went out. And you want to relight it. Now, of course, if you're going to relight it, you're going to relight it from a pre-existing flame. You're never allowed to start a new flame on Yom Tov. So you have a candle that went out. You want to relight it at some point on Yom Tov day, and you want to take from a pre-existing flame, relight it. But you have a little bit of a problem. That is, sometimes when you have a ner that goes out, the tip of the wick is charred. And it has like a little coal, a little charred material on it, and it doesn't light well. So what you want to do is you want to trim so that it should be able to light. If you have a lamp that went out and you want to relight it on that day of Yom Tov, now be very careful here. Note what the Mechaber says. You're lighting it boy b'yoyim. So if this is on the first day Yom Tov, you want to relight it on the first day of Yom Tov, and we'll see more about that in the Mishnah Berurah. Mutter lachtoich roish hapsila. You're allowed to cut off the tip of the wick and trim the wick, to cut off that little burnt piece on top, kedei sheyehei noyach lidalek, so that it should be easy to light it. Now, why would you think this is usher? Well, the havamina over here is that maybe this is tikkun moneh. If you have a candle that's not really very well or easily usable, and now you trim the wick, maybe you're perfecting a keli. Maybe that's like a makabah pater, or tikkun moneh. The Mechaber says, no, you're allowed to trim that off, and it's not a problem of tikkun moneh. Let's see the Mishnah Berurah here. First, the diak that I mentioned to you, the Mechaber says that you want to relight this lamp boy b'yoyim, on that day. Says the Mishnah Berurah, because let's say it's the first day of Yom Tov and you want to trim the wick because you have in your mind that you want to use this candle tomorrow on the second day of Yom Tov, that's a problem. Also, even if you want to go ahead and you want to prepare this for the second day of Yom Tov, you're not allowed to do that. You're not allowed to be meichen from one day of Yom Tov to the next day of Yom Tov. That's why the Mechaber says we're talking about a case where you want to relight the lamp on that day of Yom Tov. So if this is on the first day of Yom Tov, you want to trim the wick to light it on the first day of Yom Tov. If it's on the second day of Yom Tov, you want to trim the wick because you want to relight it today. Not that you want to relight it tomorrow during the week. You're not meichen for chayil on Yom Tov. You're allowed to trim off the tip of the wick. What this means is hapsila hanisrefes, the tip of the wick that has become charred. And this does not constitute the malacha of tikkun maneh by the fact that you're trimming off that charred little piece of coal at the trim of the wick. Now, why is that not tikkun maneh? I believe the reason it's not tikkun maneh is because we don't look at this as you have a something that's not a keli, and you're doing a malacha, you're doing an action to perfect it and make it a keli. The way we look at it is, you have a keli, you have a perfectly usable candle. It just has a piece of schmutz on it. It has a piece of dirt on it. It has that little charred piece of charcoal at the tip, so you want to remove it. It's almost like a dirty drinking glass. If you have a dirty drinking glass, so you don't want to drink from it because it's dirty, we don't say that washing it is tikkun maneh. You have a perfectly good glass. It has something stuck on it, so you want to wash it off. So too over here, you have a perfectly usable wick. It just has a little charcoal on the tip. You need to trim it off. That's not tikkun maneh. Aval, however, continues the Mishnah Berurah, right by the Ois Katan Lamed Zayin for the Sharet Tzion. Aval lachtoich bekli miguf hapsila. But if you want to take a scissor and you want to actually trim the wick, not only cut off the little charred piece, you're going to go further down and you're going to cut off a piece of the wick. Mistabra the aser, that already would be aser, because now you're not going ahead and just removing the undesirable piece, removing the dirt, the davar chitzoni, the thing that's not it's the shmutz attached to the keli. Now you're already trimming the wick itself. That already we're going to look at as tikkun maneh. We're going to see more about this in the future when we get to Sif Yud in Yirtzeh Hashem. Now let's go back up to Sif Daled and let's see the words of the Ramah. Says the Ramah, Hagah, V'shiyurei shemen upsila mutarin afilu b'yom tov achar Shabbos. Interesting halacha. Let's say Yom Tov was Shabbos and Sunday, or Yom Tov is Sunday and Monday. Now, you had a ner that was burning on Shabbos, and the ner went out on Shabbos. And now, because the ner went out on Shabbos, you have a ner, let's say it's an oil lamp. You have an oil lamp that's ready for use. Not only is it ready for use, but the fact that it was burning on Shabbos made it more usable on Yom Tov. We know that there's a very, very nice minig where husbands light the Shabbos licht before their wives do. They light it and blow it out. That's in order to prepare it for their wife, because once you light it, if you light it and blow it out right away, it catches flame easier. So it's easier for your wife to light it. So if you have a ner that was burning on Shabbos and it went out on Shabbos, now you have a ner that's very usable for tomorrow on Yom Tov. Now you might think in your head, wait a second, maybe I'm not allowed to use this ner on Sunday of Yom Tov. Why would that be? Because maybe this is considered that Shabbos was meichin for Yom Tov. We know we have the Isser of Hachana D'Rabba. This is like a beitza, an egg that was laid on Sunday of Yom Tov. It's aser. Why? Because it was nigmar inside the chicken on Shabbos. So that means Shabbos was meichin for Yom Tov. This is an Isser Daraisa. Shabbos is not allowed to be meichin for Yom Tov. So over here also, maybe the fact that the ner was burning on Shabbos and went out on Shabbos, that was an act of hachana, and now you're not allowed to use the ner on Sunday of Yom Tov because Shabbos was making for Yom Tov. That was the Havamina. Says the Ramah, no. V'shiyurei shemen upsila, leftover oil in a lamp and a leftover wick from a lamp, mutarin, they're permissible to be used, afilu b'yom tov achar Shabbos, even if Sunday is Yom Tov, oy shnei yomim tovim shel Rosh Hashanah. Or if you have the 2 days of Rosh Hashanah, and you had a ner that went out on the first day of Rosh Hashanah, and you want to use it on the second day of Rosh Hashanah, you're allowed to do this. Now, why the Ramah puts in the 2 days of Rosh Hashanah over here, we'll talk about in a moment. But certainly, you're allowed to do this. Let's say Yom Tov was Tuesday and Wednesday. When you have Yom Tov Tuesday and Wednesday, you're not allowed to be meichin on Tuesday for Wednesday. You're not allowed to do hachana on the first day of Yom Tov for the second day Yom Tov. But over here, this is fine. The ner went out on Tuesday. You could use it on Wednesday. It's not considered hachana. This is even mutter, says the Ramah, if it went out on Shabbos and you want to use it on Yom Tov. That's looked upon as more chamer. That's even more stringent. It's Shabbos being meichen for Yom Tov. Certainly Shabbos is a higher level of Kedusha. Shabbos is not allowed to be meichen for Yom Tov. But this is not called Shabbos being meichen for Yom Tov. And it's also mutter from one day of Rosh Hashanah to the next day of Rosh Hashanah. Says the Mishnah Berurah Nois Cotton Chavtes. What the Ramah wants to say over here is, la'afuke, he's coming to take away from, he's coming to contrast midas ha-paiskim to the opinion of the paiskim, shesvira lahu, who they hold, the imkavu b'Shabbos, that if a lamp goes out on Shabbos, asur lahadlikon achakach b'yom tov, you're not allowed to use it on Sunday if Sunday is a Yom Tov, because that's called Shabbos being meichen for Sunday, for Yom Tov. And these shitas also hold that if it went out on the first day of Rosh Hashanah, you're not allowed to use it on the second day of Rosh Hashanah. Or if it went out on the first day Yom Tov, you wouldn't be allowed to use it on the second day of Yom Tov. Now, in a sense, Rosh Hashanah is a bigger chiddush than Yom Tov. Why? Because on Yom Tov, the first day of Yom Tov cannot be meichen for the second day of Yom Tov, because we look at it as two different kedushos. Since the reason we have 2 days of Yom Tov is Sveika de Yoma, so we don't know precisely which one is Kadosh. So the two kedushos of the 2 days of Yom Tov, it's not a kedusha arichta, it's two different kedushos. The first day is Kadosh because maybe that's Yom Tov. The second day is Kadosh because maybe the first day was Chayil and only the second day is Kadosh. So it's two different kedushos. So you can't be meichen on the first day of Yom Tov for the second day of Yom Tov. But Rosh Hashanah is a little bit different. Rosh Hashanah, when we're going l'chumra, when it results in a stringency, we say that the 2 days of Rosh Hashanah are a kedusha arichta. And that's why we learned earlier, beitza shenolda on the first day of Rosh Hashanah. If an egg is laid on the first day of Rosh Hashanah, it's aser on the second day of Rosh Hashanah. Even though 2 days of Yom Tov Sheni Shal Galias, if Yom Tov is Tuesday and Wednesday, and an egg is laid on Tuesday, it's mutter on Wednesday, because it's two different kedushas. But Rosh Hashanah is a kedusha arichta. So if the egg is laid on the first day of Rosh Hashanah, it's also on the second day of Rosh Hashanah also. Why? Because since it's also on the first day of Rosh Hashanah, like any time an egg is laid on Yom Tov, it's also. So since it's also on the first day, it continues to be also on the second day, because we don't view them as two separate days. We view it as a kedusha arichta, but that's only when it results in astringency. Over here, to look at it as two different days may result in a kula. So these shitas would hold that over here we would look at it as two separate kedushas according to these poskim. And these poskim would say that if the ner went out on the first day of Rosh Hashanah, you can't use it on the second day of Rosh Hashanah, because it's like 1 day of Yom Tov being meichen for the second day of Yom Tov. If we said that the 2 days of Rosh Hashanah were two different kedushas, I'm sorry, that's because we say it's two different kedushas. If we said that it was a kedusha arichta, then we would say, okay, so the ner went out today, so why can't I use it tomorrow? That's not 1 day being meichen to the next. That's all 1 day. The chiddush, according to these poskim who answer this, the chiddush is that in this case we look at it as two different kedushas, not a kedusha arichta. But in any case, the Ramah is coming to take away from this whole shita 100%. And that's why, like the Mishnah Berurah continues, Kamash Balon Deshari. The Ramah is coming to tell you that this whole problem is not a problem. A ner going out is not considered an act of hachana for the next day. So the ner went out on Shabbos, you could use it on Sunday if Sunday is Yom Tov. The ner went out on the first day of Yom Tov, you could use it on the second day of Yom Tov. The ner went out on the first day of Rosh Hashanah, you could use it on the second day of Rosh Hashanah. Even if you're going to look at the 2 days of Rosh Hashanah as being two separate kedushas, you could still use it, because this is not considered an act of hachana. Now, why isn't it considered an act of hachana? So let's see. The Mishnah Berurah says over here, if you go weiter, the Mishnah Berurah, va'ayin le'el b'sayv Siman Tav Kuf Aleph b'Mishnah Berurah siv katan lamed daled. He sends us back to Siman Tav Kuf Aleph, to the Mishnah Berurah ois katan lamed daled, mashe kazavnu b'zeh b'shem ha'achrayim, what I wrote over there in the name of the achrayim, and I actually want to read that Mishnah Berurah. So if we go back to Tav Kuf Aleph. We go back to Tuf Kuf Aleph. And we go to Sifkat and Lamed Daled. For those of you who want to see it inside, this is on Daf Kuf Tes Vav Amid Beis. You go down to the Mishnah Berurah Ois Kat and Lamed Daled, where the Ramah had told us the same halacha over here in Tuf Kuf Aleph that he tells us over here. And over here, there's a Mishnah Berurah that spells it out very nicely. Says the Mishnah Berurah, or Itzana Loimar, what the Ramah wants to tell us with this halacha is, la'afuke, to come away, mimisha roitza lesar, from those opinions who say that the oil and the wick that's left over from Shabbos, the ner went out on Shabbos, you're not allowed to use it on Sunday. Lesar mitam de'etzim shenitliku v'nichbu, because they say that a piece of wood, or in our case a wick, that was burnt and then went out, they answer it because it's easier to light it now. It's easier to light it. In contrast to a fresh piece of firewood or a fresh wick that was never burnt. The nimtza, and therefore it comes out shakvia, that the fact that the ner went out, shenichbu b'Shabbos, the ner that went out on Shabbos, hechshirasam lemachar, it's an act of hechsher, it's an act of achana for tomorrow, lihiyos nidlakim b'tayv, so that tomorrow it should light well. So they look at it as Shabbos is being mechin for Yom Tov. V'hu doima l'may dekaimalon, and this is also because it's similar to this that we learned, that an egg that's laid on Shabbos is also to use on Sunday if Sunday is Yom Tov, because the fact that the egg was laid on Shabbos made it royal achila on Shabbos, and now it's prepared for Yom Tov use, right? Yeah, it's not ready. It's not royal achila until it's laid. So it was laid on Shabbos. Shabbos made it royal achila. Now you want to use it on Sunday when it's Yom Tov. That means Shabbos was making for Yom Tov. So to over here, these poskim hold. You have a ner that went out on Shabbos. Okay, the fact that it was burning on Shabbos and it went out on Shabbos makes it easier to light it on Sunday. And Sunday is Yom Tov. That means Shabbos was making for Yom Tov. You're not allowed to do that. That's what these sheetas hold. And the people who hold this way, they go even further and they say, a ner that went out on the first day of Rosh Hashanah, asurim lamacharasai, is also to use on the second day of Rosh Hashanah. Why? Since the 2 days of Rosh Hashanah are not because of Sveika the Yoma, it's because Minig Aviseinu B'Yadenu, and it's a vadai that we have to have 2 days of Rosh Hashanah. We don't view them as a Kedusha Arichta, we view them as two independent Kedushas, the Kishtei Kedushas. The Ein Kedusha Achas Mechina Lachaverta. So the first day of Rosh Hashanah, which is a one Kedusha, cannot do Achana for the second day of Rosh Hashanah, which is a different Kedusha. Ukamay b'Yom Tov Achar Shabbos. And in another place, it says, why? Sometimes we do look at the 2 days of Rosh Hashanah as being Kedusha Arichta. That's only when that results in a Chumrah, not when it results in a Kula. Okay. Now, going back to Kuf Lamed Gimel Lamed Beis, I just want to finish off the last few words of Mishnah Berurah Iskat L'Chav Tes, where he says that over there, I wrote in Sifkat and Lamed Daled, I didn't read all the way to the end over there, Masha Kasavnu Bezeh B'Shem Ha'achroinim, the Lechatchila Tov Lahachmir, Lechatchila, we should be Machmir, and we should not use the psila that burnt out on Shabbos or on the first day of Rosh Hashanah or on the first day of Yom Tov for the second day. If you're going to use that wick, turn it upside down and use the other side. Okay, now we go to Sif Hey. Says the Mechaber. Excuse me. I dripped some coffee on my Mishnah Berurah. And if you don't blot it up right away, it could ruin the paper. Okay. Says the Mechaber. Sif Hey. Ner shel batala. A ner that you don't need for any reason. Oh, we're going to see what that means, that you don't need it for any reason. But you don't need it for any significant reason. Dahainu she'enai tzarech lo. To light a ner for no reason, you don't need it. Also, you're not allowed to light it on Yom Tov. It's true that havara, hayil, that it's a mutter for tzarech chaychel nefesh, it's mutter for other purposes too, but for nothing? Just to light an air on Yom Tov? You have no heter to light an air on Yom Tov for absolutely no reason at all. Says the Mishnah Berurah is cut limud. The hainu she'enei tzarech loy. Says the Mishnah Berurah. We don't need even to say that if you have absolutely no need for the havara at all, it's usher to light the ner. According to some, it's an issa lav da'araisa to do the havara for no reason at all. Ayin Siman Tov Yudches, like we're going to see later in Siman Tov Yudches. Even if you are doing it for some specious type of tzarech, and the Chavetz Chaim gives an example. If you want to show off, and this, by the way, gives you a little window into the poverty of earlier times by Yidden, if you are trying to show off, look, I could burn candles for nothing. It's like somebody who leaves his lights on just to show off. You think, what? I have to be makbid on my electric bill, and I have to shut the lights off when I leave the room. I don't have to be makbid. I could burn lights as much as I want. So somebody wants to light a candle on Yom Tov just to show off that I could burn extra candles. Since this is no tzarech Yom Tov whatsoever, or it is no tzarech to his guf, he's not getting any physical pleasure from this lamp, klal, aser. This is aser. You're doing it mamish aloy. That's called mamish aloy l'tzarech. Achein, however, im oisezel l'chvay Yom Tov, if you're burning the candle l'chvay Yom Tov, it's nice. You're coming to a beautiful Yom Tov Suda. You want to have neris burning on the table. Then you're doing it l'chavad Yom Tov. Pashat the mutter. That's definitely mutter. We've got mitzvah ikka. That would even be a mitzvah of kavod Yom Tov. V'afal gav shekvar hidlik neri shel bracha. Even though you'll say, what do you mean you're burning candles l'chvad Yom Tov? You already sinned the Yom Tov licht. What do you need more candles? No. Kishamayisiv neros laharbais arabibesoi. When you want to light more neris l'chvad Yom Tov, to increase, to better the ambiance in your house and to bring more light into the house, Ikka Simchas Yom Tov. That's definitely a greater Simchas Yom Tov. So that's called a Tzarech Yom Tov and a Tzarech Gufay, and that's Mutter on Yom Tov. However, the Mishnah Berurah says, V'dafka b'layla, you're only allowed to do this at night. But to do it during the day, there's no purpose. So that would be awesome. However, bris mila b'bayis, if you're performing a bris in the house, shenoyagin lahadlik neros, where they had a minute to light neros by a bris, mistaber the mutter. Then it makes sense that should be mutter. The chol zeh kvoid v'chibav mitzvah, because that is a covet for the mitzvah and it shows love for the mitzvah. So that would be mutter. Continues the mechaber. So the mechaber said it's if hey ner shabbatala, a ner that you don't need at all. The hainu she'enei tzarech lo also lahadlikay. Avol, however, on the last line of Kuf Lamed Gimel Lamed Beis, Avol, shall Beis HaKnesses, if you want to light Neris in Shul, Loi Chashiv Shel Batala, that's not considered a Ner Shel Batala. And therefore, Umutar Lahadlikai, you're allowed to light Neris in Shul, Afilu B'Yom Tov Sheni Achar Mincha, even if you're doing it late in the afternoon after you already daven Mincha on Yom Tov Sheni, you're still allowed to light Neris in the Shul. Ve'en Bozem Misham Meichin L'Choil. And we're not going to say it's also because you don't really need it for Yom Tov anymore at this point, and it's going to be burning already after Yom Tov. It's going to be burning after the Zman, so maybe there's a hachana problem? No. Shaharei bahadlakasa yesh mitzvah la'isa shah. Because at the time that you're lighting it, there still is a mitzvah. Says the Mishnah Berurah, Ais Katan Lamed Aleph, on Kuf Lamed Gimel Lamed Beis near the bottom. Avol shel Beis HaKnesses, but if you want to light Neris in the shul, Loi Chashiv shel Batala. That's not considered a wasted lamp. That's not considered a lamp that's being lit for nothing. We don't even need to say that at night that's true. Where you mamish need the ner, they're not going to come to a dark, dingy room in the shul to daven. So certainly if it's at night, you need neris in the shul. The chiddush over here is that to light additional neris, to light neris in the Beis HaKnesses during the day on Yom Tov is also mutter, and it's not considered a ner shel batala. Shehu kvoid hamakom, because that is a covet for the Beis HaKnesses to light neris in the Beis HaKnesses. Kamay shenemar, and this comes from a pasuk in Yeshaya, Kabdu Hashem Ba'urim, honor the Rebbeinu Shalom with lights. On his cotton lamed bays, the Mechaber said you could even do this on the second day of Yom Tov, already late in the afternoon after Mincha. So you're already daven Mincha in the shul. You could still light Neris in the shul on Yom Tov. That's not considered a Ner Shel Batala, and it's also not considered a problem of Hachana that you're lighting a Ner that's still going to be burning after the Zman during the Chol. Says the Mishnah Berurah, certainly before you daven Mincha, you could light Nerish, because then it's also a covet for the Tfilas Mincha. The Chiddush is you're allowed to do it even after Mincha. Eis Katan Lamed Gimel, you're allowed to do this. The Mechaber said because yesh mitzvah la'isa shar. Ritzaina Laimar, what the Mechaber wants to say is, afilu ain't sarich leha'or, even if you don't need the light. So, in other words, the Mechaber didn't say that the reason you're allowed to do this is because, what do you mean? You have a tzarech, you need the light. No, he said it's a tzarech mitzvah. Yesh mitzvah, the Mechaber says. So the Mishnah Berurah is medayik, and he says, what the Mechaber wants to say is, afilu ain't tzarech laha'or, even if you don't need the light. It's still early enough in the day that it's light outside. Afilu hachi ika mitzvah lahadlik mishum kavod beis hakneses. There's still a mitzvah to light additional neros because of the honor, the kavod of the Beis HaKnesses. It's a bigger kavod for the Beis HaKnesses. I heard from a Rosh Yeshiva in Bnei Brak, Yeshiva's Beis Meir in Bnei Brak. I don't even know if he's alive anymore. The Yeshiva years ago over there was a fellow by the name of Rav Rothberg. He once came here to Staten Island to Yeshiva, and he gave a shmooze in the Beis Medrash. And he told me afterwards, he remembers my grandmother, my mother's mother, Aleh Shalom, Chana Yurowitz, Aleh Shalom. They lived in Bnei Brak, and he told me that she would come into the Beis HaMedrash in Beis Meir every Erev Shabbos and light Neris in the Beis Medrash, l'chvaid the Beis Medrash. Okay, V'im continues the Mishnah Berurah right by the Eis Katan Mem Gimel for the Shar HaTziyon. V'im hu kvar samach l'chashecha. If it's already late in the day and it's already close to the dark, I feel a bit of shari lahadlik, that even in your house you're allowed to light neris, even if it's near the end of Yom Tov. Because what do you mean? Right now I need an air. I need the light, so I'm allowed to light it. The words of the Mechaber were, you're allowed to light this licht in the Beis HaKnesses, even though it's after Mincha, it's a covet for the Beis HaKnesses, and yesh mitzvah la'isa shah. La'isa shah, says the Mishnah Berurah, umashma afilu ain't sham adam bebeis hakneses shara b'hai taima. The Mechaber said you're allowed to do it because it's a mitzvah of covet for the Beis HaKnesses. He says the implication is you're allowed to do this even if there's nobody really there. V'ayin b'bir halacha, but he sends you over to the bir halacha divrei hamatzkel shaharei, where he goes into this a little deeper. Now we continue the Mechaber. The second line on Kuf Lamed Daled Amud Aleph, right by the Eis Katan Lamed Hey for the Mishnah Berurah, says the Mechaber, Ulesakein hapsilois v'ha'ashashiyos b'yom tov achar mincha. Let's say you want to prepare wicks and the lanterns, the lamps, b'yom tov achar mincha, on the second day of Yom Tov after mincha, im writes lahadlik bay b'yom, if your intent is to light these lanterns still on Yom Tov, then it's mutter. If you're not going to light them until after Yom Tov is over, then it's aser. Says the Mishnah Berurah's Katan Lamed Hey, ulasakin apsila is to prepare the wicks. Even just to take a candle and put it into a candlestick on Yom Tov, so that you should have a candle ready to light after Yom Tov, that's aser. Now you'll ask me, why is it aser? What malacha is there? Says the Mishnah Berurah, any level of tircha is usher to do on Yom Tov if you're being meichin for the weekday, if you're being meichin for after Yom Tov. I feel in Yom Tov rishon l'sheni. And this means, Rabbi say, let's say you want to take a bottle of soda and you want to put a bottle of soda, you want to take a bottle of soda up from the basement and put it in the refrigerator, Yom Tov afternoon, near the end of the day, because you know you're going to want to eat something after Yom Tov is over, and you want to have a cold glass of soda. You can't do that. Now you'll ask me, why not? What malacha did I do? You didn't do any malacha, but you did hachana. You were teireach. You did a tircha. You exerted yourself on Yom Tov for hachana for after Yom Tov. You're not allowed to do that. Now, if you want to put it in on Yom Tov afternoon and you're thinking to yourself, I'll probably drink from now till the end of Yom Tov and I'll have a cold soda after Yom Tov, that's fine. But if you're not going to use it, if you're doing it distinctly, I know I have somebody coming over on Motzei Yom Tov, I want to have a nice fresh fizzy bottle of soda. I'm not even going to open it on Yom Tov, but I'm putting it in the refrigerator now, so it should be closed after Yom Tov. That's a tircha on Yom Tov for after Yom Tov. You're not allowed to do that. That's a chana. Sivav. Ein nois ner al gabe ilon me erev Yom Tov. Very interesting halacha. You're not allowed to hang a ner on a tree on erev Yom Tov. Erev Yom Tov, you're not allowed to hang a ner on a tree. Why? Because we're afraid that if you have a lamp hanging on a tree, you put it there on erev Yom Tov, but you put it there on erev Yom Tov intending to leave it there over Yom Tov. We're afraid if your lamp is hanging on the tree on Yom Tov, you're going to come to be mishtamish be'ilan. How are you going to be mishtamish be'ilan? Well, you might take the lamp off the tree to go take it somewhere else. Removing the lamp from the tree is being mishtamish be'ilan. That's called using the tree. And you're not allowed to use a tree on Yom Tov. This is the famous gzeira. It applies on Shabbos too. It's a gzeira shemayava yitlesh. Maybe you'll end up coming to pick a fruit off the tree or break a branch off the tree. So you're not allowed to use a tree on Yom Tov. That's why if you're out in your backyard, you come home from shul, sukkahs, a lot of us have the minig, where we come home, we don't come into the house and then go to the sukkah. We come straight from shul and go into the sukkah. So let's say you came from shul and you went into the backyard to go to the sukkah and you want to take off your hat and hang it up. You can't hang your hat on the tree. You're not allowed to use a tree. That's called being mishtamish be'ilan. You're not allowed to do that. Says the Mishnah Berurah Kat Lamed Vav. Ner me erev Yom Tov. To be Yom Tov, pshita da aser. On Yom Tov itself, you're certainly not allowed to hang a lamp on a tree. The hanacha b'chlal shimashu. Because hanging the lamp on the tree is an act of being mishtamish be'ilan. That's certainly you're not allowed to do. The chiddush of the mechaber over here is ela afilu hiniach me'erev Yom Tov al dashi yemunach sham bi Yom Tov aser. You're not allowed to hang the lamp on the tree on erev Yom Tov with the intent that it should continue to hang there on Yom Tov. Why? The keved to be Yom Tov mutal ataltal aner. Because since you're allowed to handle a ner on Yom Tov, now we have to be worried that on Yom Tov you might go take the lamp off the tree. And that is also called being mishtamish be'ilan. You see, on Shabbos you wouldn't have this problem. If you hung the lamp on a tree on Erev Shabbos, that's not usher. Why? Because on Yom Tov you're not allowed to touch on Shabbos you're not allowed to touch a lamp. On Shabbos, a lamp is muktzah. So we don't have to worry that you might come on Shabbos to remove the lamp from the tree. You're not allowed to. It's muktzah. But on Yom Tov, you're allowed to handle the lamp. It's not muktzah. So if you hang it up there on Erev Yom Tov, we have to be afraid you might remove it on Yom Tov. And removing it on Yom Tov is also an act of being mishtamish be'ilan, which is aser. The kanal b'siman shin lamed vav sif aleph b'hago. V'zeu ma shesiyam ha'mechaber shemiyavoyu. Now I did note that there's a very interesting footnote here. There's Dirshu footnote number 34. Let me get over there. Okay, Dirshu footnote number 34. So we're saying you're not allowed to hang a lamp on a tree on Erev Yom Tov to leave it there on Yom Tov, because we're afraid you might take it off the tree on Yom Tov. Okay, says the footnote here. Let's say there's something that you want to put on the tree, and you have absolutely no intent to handle it on Yom Tov. Like what? Okay, let's say you oh, no, I don't want to go there. Nothing's coming to me right now. You want to store something up on the tree. I don't know. You have a little tree house and you have junk in the backyard. And you don't want the junk in the backyard on Sukkot, because on Sukkot, you're going into your backyard. You have guests coming over to the backyard. So you want to neaten up your backyard. So you want to take some stuff from the backyard and you want to put it up in the tree. You want to put it up in the tree house on Erev Yom Tov. That, says the footnote here, something that you have no intent on removing from the tree on Yom Tov. You don't even have any intent to use that item on Yom Tov. Tzidei Dagoin Reb Shlomo Zalman Auerbach Zechesad V'Kadosh Levracha Shemuter L'Hanichai Le'ilan Meba'id Yom. Such a chayfetz you would be allowed to leave in the tree on Erev Yom Tov. Sharei Lo Metzinu Iser. This is the main reason I'm quoting this footnote, because this was bothering me. Sharei Lo Metzinu Iser Litlai Sal Al Ilan Meba'id Yom. We don't have a halacha anywhere that says that you're not allowed to hang a basket on a tree on Erev Yom Tov. We also don't find that a halacha anywhere that says if you store things on a tree, you're mechuyev to remove them from the tree on Erev Yom Tov, because we're afraid that if you don't, you may come to remove them on Yom Tov, which would be an isser of being mishtamish be'ilah. We don't find such a halacha anywhere. We only find this halacha over here by a lamp. This that the Mishnah Berurah is telling you, that you're not allowed to hang the lamp on the tree, because since you're allowed to be metaltal the lamp on Yom Tov, we're afraid you might take it off. Well, the implication of that is that you're not allowed to put anything that's mutter betiltal on Yom Tov on a tree on Erev Yom Tov, lest you remove it on Erev Yom Tov. The Isser only is on something where there's a very reasonable expectation that you might handle it on Yom Tov. Now, a lamp on Yom Tov, especially in those days when the burning lamp was their primary light source, so a movable lamp is something that you handled all the time. Therefore, we don't let you put it on the tree on Erev Yom Tov, because it is very reasonable to expect that you will come to remove it from the tree and move it somewhere else on Yom Tov. But stam chafetzim, you could leave on the tree, and you could put them on the tree on Erev Yom Tov. Okay. Let's go to Siv Zayin. Ein poichsin ner shel cheres. You're not allowed to open an earthenware oil lamp on Yom Tov. Dahainu, what does this mean? Ba'oidoi rach. How did they form earthenware oil lamps? So they had malleable clay. You took a beitza shel cheres. What does that mean? An egg of clay. That's what the raw clay, before it was formed into a keli, they would make balls of clay. So you're making a small lamp, you had a small ball of clay, and when it's soft, before you fire it in the kiln, you form it into a lamp, and then you fire it in the kiln to harden it. So depending on what kind of keli you needed, you started off with different size balls of clay. So therefore, says the Mechaber, ein poichsin ner shel cheres. You're not allowed to open up and form an earthenware ner. Dahainu, what this means is, ba'oidoi rach, when the clay is still soft, before it's been fired, k'may beitzim shel yoitzer, like the eggs, the balls of clay of the pottery makers. The yoitzer is the creator, the one who makes it. Lema'ich oisai, to press it and form it bayad with your hand, lasais loy base kibble, in order to make a little bowl, a keli that could hold oil. You're not allowed to do this because you're making a keli. So you have a ball of clay. Machaber is telling you, you're not allowed to take it on Yom Tov and press it, push your fist into it, or push your thumbs into it, and form it into a bowl that you could pour oil into and stick a wick in. You're not allowed to do that on Yom Tov. That's mamish tikkun maneh. Says the Mishnah Berurah, it's cut lamed zayin. Oisekli, v'hu adin, same halacha would apply. L'pa'amim kisha'adayin hu rach. Sometimes when you have the lamp that's already formed, but it's still soft, it hasn't been fired yet. Mesimin kash, they would take straw, oishar davar, or some other kind of filler material. Ba'aviroi, they would fill the inside of the keli. What's going on here? You took a ball of soft, malleable clay, and you went ahead and you formed it into a bowl. Now, before you put it into the kiln to harden it, they would stuff the inside with they would pack it with some kind of material. Why? Explains the Mishnah Berurah. They would put this stuff, the stuffing, ba'aviroi, in the hollow opening of the keli, midoifen ledoifen, from wall to wall. They would stuff it up. Why? So that the keli should not collapse while it's still soft, before it gets hardened in the kiln. You're not allowed to remove the packing from inside the keli because that's makeh b'patish. The keli is not finished and ready for use until you remove the packing. The chen shnei kelim, similarly, another case, if you have two kelim, shehem mechubarim yachad b'tchilas asiyasam, where the way they're made is they are stuck together at first. Kigoin shnei neiros, like if you're forming two earthenware candlesticks. When you first form them, you form them as one piece to join together, and then you break them apart. Or they used to make cups apparently that way too. Ukahai gavna, ein peichsenais on l'shtayim. You're not allowed to break them into two on Yom Tov, shulkem asakim kli, because that's tikkun moneh. You didn't have an individual keli yet. You had two candlesticks that were stuck together. Now you broke them apart and you made two candlesticks. You're not allowed to do that. If they happen to get stuck together after they were already finished kalim, so it was already two finished candlesticks, now somehow they got stuck together a little bit, then mutal paschan, then you're allowed to break them apart, because that's not tikkun maneh. They already were two individual candlesticks. B'derech harai, in a little temporary way, in an insignificant way, they got stuck together. You want to break them apart, you can break them apart. The poskim speak about over here, and I believe the Dirshu in the footnotes discusses it as well. You can take a look. They talk about things like, let's say you have a multi-pack of single-serving yogurt containers. Sometimes you have a multi-pack, so you have 6 cups of yogurt, and they're attached at the top, so you have to break them apart. Are you allowed to break those apart on Yom Tov? There's a machlokes poskim about that. Some poskim say that it's mutter, because what do you mean? It's 6 different distinct kelim. These were already formed into 6 distinct cups. They're not stuck together because they weren't finished being made. They stick them together because they want to sell them as a multi-pack. But it's 6 cups of yogurt. So most poskim look at it and say there's nothing wrong with breaking those apart. Some poskim disagree. Okay, you know what? I think we're going to stop over here. We did, Baruch Hashem, really, for the most part, Kuf Lamed Dalet Amud Aleph as well. We'll pick up next time with Siv Ches. Thank you so much for joining me for limud HaTorah. I'm happy that going into Yom Tov today and yesterday, we picked up 2 days, because we're going to fall behind the Dirshu schedule now when it's Yom Tov. But at least we picked up 2 days, so we won't fall terribly behind. I guess tomorrow is Erev Yom Tov, so it's going to be a few days since I see you next. Everybody should have a wonderful, 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 wonderful Simchas Tika Yom Tov, an enjoyable Yom Tov out in the Sukkah. We should be Zeicha to go from the Diras Kfa into the Diras Arai. And when we're in that Diras Arai, we should remember that it's not the Diras Kva, it's not the house that shelters us, it's not the house that protects us, it's not the Gashmias that protects us, it's not the paycheck that gives us our sustenance, it's not the doctors that keep us safe, it's not the mask. Wear the mask. Don't be medayik when I'm saying. Wear that mask. But it's not ultimately the mask that keeps you safe. It's Borei Olam. It's the Rabbeinu Shalom that keeps us safe. It's our tefillas that keeps us safe. It's our amunah and betachon that keeps us safe. But normal ishtadlus you have to make, Rabbi Say. And the ishtadlus to make, the responsible ishtadlus to make right now is you're indoors, you're with other people, wear that mask. Everyone should be safe. Have an enjoyable Aliyah Dika Yom Tov. Be well.